The Nevada desert stretched endlessly under a blistering sun, the horizon shimmering with heat mirages. Dust swirled around the edges of the firing range, where rows of recruits hunched behind sandbags, rifles propped on bipods, sweat trickling down their foreheads. It was early morning, yet the temperature had already begun its slow climb toward unbearable. The scent of gunpowder and scorched earth hung thick in the air, punctuated by the occasional sharp bark of rifles and distant clangs of steel targets. Every Marine knew this drill. Precision was everything. Mistakes could be fatal in real combat, and only the disciplined thrived. Captain Ryan Cowan, a seasoned Marine sniper instructor, strode along the line with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes scanned the recruits with quiet scrutiny, reading every twitch, every flicker of doubt or confidence. Among the group, one figure stood out, not because of size, muscle, or demeanor, but because of an eerie calm. Elena Ward, a young woman with dark hair, pulled tightly into a bun and piercing green eyes, adjusted her scope as if she had all the time in the world. Her movements were precise, almost surgical, and her breathing was deliberate, synchronized with each heartbeat. She didn't fidget, curse, or glance around nervously like the others. She simply prepared her rifle and waited. The other recruits whispered among themselves. "Who does she think she is?" muttered one lanky kid from Texas, shifting uncomfortably in the sand. Another snorted. "Probably just lucky. Women can't shoot like men, right?" Laughter rippled through the group, light and careless, unaware that they were being silently judged by the woman they mocked. Elena didn't react. Her eyes stayed locked on the distant steel target, standing like a defiant figure against the desert's haze. Ryan felt a twinge of curiosity. There was something in her stance, in the way her fingers cradled the trigger, that reminded him of someone he had long lost, someone legendary. "Next shot, Ward," Ryan said, his voice calm but carrying the authority of a man who had seen 100 men fall short. Elena didn't flinch. She adjusted her breathing, exhaled, and slowly squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, a crisp echo against the arid hills. Dust puffed around the target, and the metal gong clanged, dead center. Murmurs ran through the group. Heads turned. Even the instructors raised eyebrows. One of them muttered, "That's impossible." The laughter from the earlier mockery died instantly, replaced by awe and disbelief. Ryan stepped closer, squinting through his binoculars. The shot was perfect. Not lucky, not fluky, perfect. He could see the subtle compensation for crosswinds, a minute adjustment for mirage heat rising off the sand. Whoever trained her had taught her techniques that went beyond standard Marine sniper curriculum. And Ryan had seen those techniques before. He couldn't place it at first, a ghost of a memory, a shadow of a man who had once operated in silence and precision, so extreme it bordered on inhuman. Another recruit, a tall man named Harris, approached, trying to mask his disbelief. "You had luck," he said, smirking nervously. "One shot doesn't mean anything." Elena's gaze didn't leave the target. "Then you'll see," she said softly, almost to herself. Her voice carried no threat, no pride, just quiet certainty. It unsettled him, and he walked away, unsure why he felt a prickle along the back of his neck. Something about her wasn't normal. Something about her was trained, but not by anyone in the Marines. Ryan walked alongside her, lowering his binoculars. "Ward," he said, calling her by last name, "where did you learn to shoot like that?" His tone was casual, but edged with genuine curiosity. Elena didn't answer immediately. She didn't even blink. She simply adjusted her scope and prepared for another round. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft, controlled, like she was telling a secret to the desert itself. "I learned from someone who doesn't exist anymore." Ryan froze, the words slicing through him like a cold wind. The phrasing was familiar, too familiar. It was the same line he had heard a dozen times in his past, whispered by a man who had disappeared in Iraq, leaving nothing but his legend behind. Ryan's mind raced. Ghost, that had been his call sign. Ghost, the sniper who had saved his squad in Fallujah and vanished without a trace. A man no one could ever catch. The man who could make 100 enemies disappear without leaving a single trace. Ghost, dead, presumed, gone. And yet, somehow, here was Elena Ward, channeling his teachings, mimicking his subtle techniques, breathing like him, aiming like him. Ryan shook his head slightly. Could it really be possible? Was Ghost training recruits off the grid? Or was this some freak coincidence? The recruits continued their drills, unaware of the tension building between instructor and student. Elena fired again, another shot, and again, a perfect hit, even in shifting wind. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Every detail was correct. Breathing, heart rate, trigger pressure, stance, alignment, and mental timing. It was Ghost's style, every movement identical, yet softer, refined, controlled. Ryan realized she wasn't just talented. She had been molded by someone who had lived the battlefield, someone who had survived against impossible odds. And the thought both thrilled and frightened him. By midday, the desert heat had reached its peak. Sweat ran down faces, stung eyes, and soaked clothing. But Elena showed no sign of fatigue. She carried her rifle as if it were an extension of her own body, unshaken by the sun, the dust, or the sneers around her. Ryan watched her silently, feeling a mixture of respect and unease. This was no ordinary recruit. This was someone who had survived training beyond the official curriculum, beyond the scope of any Marine sniper course. And the more he observed, the more he feared the truth, that someone he had once known, someone thought dead, had returned, not in person, but in her. As the training session ended, the recruits began to pack up. Some muttered, others avoided her gaze. The earlier bravado completely evaporated. Ryan walked beside Elena, keeping his tone neutral, even as his mind swirled with questions. "You've got skills beyond any Marine I've seen," he said. "I need to know who trained you." Elena looked at him, her green eyes calm, piercing, unreadable. "He taught me how to disappear," she said. And in that moment, Ryan felt the first tremor of something extraordinary, something he didn't yet understand, but would soon uncover. As the sun dipped low, painting the desert in streaks of orange and gold, Ryan returned to his observation point, staring at Elena as she disassembled her rifle with meticulous care. There was grace in her movements, precision in her routine, and a quiet intensity that hinted at secrets far beyond the range, beyond the official files, beyond even Ryan's understanding. Somewhere in the shifting heat waves, a shadow stirred in his memory, whispering the impossible. Ghost was alive, or at least his teachings were. And Ryan knew, without fully realizing why, that Elena Ward was about to change everything he thought he knew about snipers, warfare, and survival. The night settled over the base like a velvet curtain, soft and dark, yet heavy with tension. The desert wind had died down, leaving only the low hum of distant generators and the occasional scrape of sand against metal. Inside the barracks, recruits moved about quietly, some catching brief sleep, others hunched over notebooks or rifles, cleaning and checking equipment with meticulous care. But Elena Ward was nowhere to be found in the sleeping quarters. She had chosen solitude, sitting on the edge of the empty firing range, the cool desert night brushing against her face, her rifle disassembled in front of her like a ritualistic puzzle. Whispers began to spread through the barracks soon after. Those who had witnessed her performance that day couldn't help but talk. "Did you see that shot? Dead center." A young corporal exclaimed to his bunkmate, still shaking with disbelief. Yeah, but something about her, it's not just skill. It's like she's trained by someone who's seen real war. The words carried on the desert wind and multiplied, growing into a quiet murmur that wrapped itself around the base like a persistent shadow. Ryan Callan paced the corridors, the dim light from the fluorescent bulbs bouncing off his polished boots. He replayed the day over and over in his mind. Elena's breathing, her calm precision, the deliberate timing of her trigger squeeze. The memory of her voice, soft, almost melodic when she said, "He taught me how to disappear," haunted him. Ghost. He couldn't get the name out of his head. A cold shiver ran down his spine as he remembered the desert in Iraq, the dry heat, the long hours crouched in sand, the smell of smoke and blood lingering in the air. Ghost had been a myth to most, a name spoken in hushed reverence among snipers and special forces operatives. His kills had never been officially documented, yet every enemy unit had feared the invisible marksman who seemed to strike without warning, disappearing as if he had never been there. Ryan had trained under him briefly, seen him work, but Ghost had vanished during an extraction in Fallujah. Officially, he was listed as KIA. Unofficially, no one knew. Ghost had been untouchable. Untouchable, and now, somehow, Elena mirrored him perfectly. Unable to ignore the nagging curiosity, Ryan slipped into the dimly lit intelligence office. Papers and digital records lined the walls, each file meticulously labeled and categorized. He pulled up Elena Ward's record, scrolling through her enlistment papers, medical evaluations, and training scores. Her file was pristine, but strangely incomplete. Years were missing. Training courses had gaps, periods where her records simply didn't exist. No civilian schools, no military programs listed, just nothing. He tapped his fingers on the desk, brow furrowed. How does someone become this? Precise and leave no trace? He muttered to himself. A soft sound behind him made him turn sharply. Elena stood in the doorway, her expression calm, unreadable. She wore her standard-issue uniform, sleeves rolled up, rifle case slung casually over her shoulder. She looked like any other Marine, if it weren't for the quiet intensity that radiated from her. Ryan gestured toward the screen. Ward, your record is unusual. Missing years, gaps in training. I need answers. Who trained you? Elena tilted her head, green eyes catching the dim light. For a moment, she said nothing. Ryan's patience stretched thin, though he dared not show frustration. Then quietly, almost as if telling a secret to the desert itself, she replied, Someone who doesn't exist anymore. The room went cold. The words sank into Ryan's chest like ice. He swallowed hard. Ghost. The phrasing, the cadence, the haunting inevitability. It was him. Her mentor. His mind raced back to the dry, ruined streets of Iraq, to the long hours under the scorching sun and cold nights of sand and blood. Ghost had taught him the art of invisibility, of patience, of seeing the battlefield differently than anyone else. And now those lessons were alive in Elena Ward. Ryan took a deep breath. Do you mean Ghost? His voice was cautious, almost reverent. Elena's lips curved in a small, almost imperceptible smile. Call him what you will, she said softly. He taught me everything I know. Taught me to vanish. Taught me to wait. Taught me to survive. She looked away, her eyes clouding with something that felt like sorrow, or longing, or both. Ryan realized that she carried not just skill but memory, a memory of someone who had saved her life, someone she had loved, someone she had lost. The whispers outside the office grew louder. Fellow Marines speculated about her background, their curiosity fueled by disbelief. Some claimed she had connections to a rogue operative, others that she had trained privately with ex-Special Forces instructors. No one truly knew, and Ryan couldn't share his own suspicions, not yet. There were rules, regulations, and consequences. Revealing Ghost's legacy would attract attention from intelligence and command, and possibly put Elena in danger. Unable to resist, Ryan began digging further, his hands shaking slightly. Old mission logs, photographs, and classified reports emerged from digital archives. One file caught his attention, a black and white photograph of a man with a rifle, crouched in the ruins of a building, face obscured by shadows. The file was labeled Ghost, Classified. Ryan's pulse quickened. The stance, the posture, the calm focus, every line mirrored what he had seen in Elena today. It was impossible to ignore. She wasn't just trained. She was molded by Ghost himself. Meanwhile, Elena packed her rifle, disassembled with meticulous precision, each piece sliding into place with practiced grace. Ryan studied her from across the room, a sense of awe and unease building. He realized she wasn't a typical recruit. She wasn't here to learn. She was here to survive, to excel, and perhaps to carry forward a legacy that had been thought lost. The memory of Ghost's voice, his words, his presence, all haunted him now, tying the young Marine in front of him to a man who should have been gone forever. The night deepened, shadows stretching across the desert floor outside. Ryan finally stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Ward, whatever your past, whatever your training, it's going to matter. You need to trust me." Elena looked at him, eyes steady, unwavering. "I don't need to trust anyone. I only need to aim true." The words were cold, but contained a weight he couldn't yet comprehend. Ryan exhaled slowly. This was no ordinary recruit. This was something far more dangerous, far more precise, and far more alive than he could have imagined. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that Elena Ward's past, the shadow of Ghost, was only the beginning of a story he hadn't yet fully grasped. The desert outside lay still, but the storm of secrets, memories, and deadly skill had only just begun. By the time the lights in the barracks flickered off, Ryan remained at his desk, staring at Alana's records, piecing together what little he knew. Somewhere in the mountains, in the deserts, in the shadows of America's classified operations, a ghost had lived on. And now, for the first time in years, he realized Ghost was alive, or at least his legacy was. And it had a name, Elena Ward. The desert night gave way to the faint pink of dawn over the Nevada range. But Ryan Callan couldn't shake the images haunting his mind. He sat alone in his small office, files scattered around him like the wreckage of memory, and stared at Elena's record again. Her precision, her calm, her almost supernatural ability to vanish into focus. It wasn't luck. It was training. And it was training he had once witnessed firsthand, under the most brutal conditions imaginable. His thoughts carried him back, nearly a decade, to the scorched streets of Fallujah, Iraq. The sun had been an unforgiving glare, bouncing off concrete and twisted metal, and the smell of smoke, sand, and gunpowder had lingered in the air like a constant reminder of danger. Ryan's squad had been pinned down, a narrow alleyway between two crumbling buildings offering the only cover. Every sound was magnified, the faint hiss of a distant sniper, the shuffle of boots, the whisper of the wind across broken walls. They were outnumbered, trapped, and barely breathing. Then Ghost had arrived. He was like nothing Ryan had ever seen. Silent as a shadow, moving along the rooftops with no trace, no sound, no indication he had even been there. Ryan remembered the first shot, a crack so sharp it seemed to cleave the air. An enemy fighter slumped, a split second after appearing from cover, and Ryan's heart had thudded in disbelief. Ghost moved like a phantom, every motion calculated, every breath timed to the rhythm of survival. Ryan watched, awestruck, as the man vanished and reappeared, picking off targets as if they were pieces on a chessboard. He was precise, methodical, almost terrifying in his efficiency. Ghost had saved his squad that day. He had whispered instructions over comms. Voice calm, distant, like a ghost himself. One shot. One heartbeat. Patience. Wait. Ryan remembered following the instructions to the letter, feeling his own skills sharpen under Ghost's unseen hand. By the end of the day, Ryan had seen his mentor disappear into the smoke and rubble, leaving only spent casings and whispers of legend. When the extraction team arrived, Ghost was gone, as if the desert itself had swallowed him whole. No one knew where he went. Officially, he was Kayar. Unofficially, he was a myth, a ghost haunting the minds of those who survived. And now, years later, that ghost was alive in Elena. Ryan's pulse quickened. He replayed the way she had held her rifle, how her breathing matched the precise cadence Ghost had taught, how her stance mirrored the shadowy figure he had glimpsed through binoculars in Iraq. Every detail was there. Every instinct. She wasn't just trained. She had been molded in the very image of a man who had become legend. And she was quiet, patient, disciplined, as if she carried the weight of that legacy on her shoulders. He closed his eyes, trying to process the impossibility of it. Ghost had disappeared without trace. No one had seen him since Fallujah. No one knew if he had survived the desert, the sandstorms, the enemy. Yet here was Elena, a living, breathing testament to his skill, his philosophy, his discipline. Could it be possible that Ghost had survived? That he had trained someone in secret, somewhere off-grid, teaching her everything he had taught Ryan, and more? The room around Ryan seemed to fade, replaced by memory. He saw the broken streets of Fallujah, the twisted steel, the smoke rising from collapsed buildings. He remembered the fear, the adrenaline, the constant calculation required to survive each moment. And he remembered Ghost's words, ringing through comms like a mantra. You don't fight the enemy. You fight time, distance, and your own fear. When you control those, you control the battlefield. Those words, once etched into Ryan's mind, now seemed to breathe again, alive in Elena's form. He recalled the night after the mission, huddled with his squad in a makeshift compound, the stars above deceptively calm. Ghost had vanished without a trace. No farewells, no explanation, only a note scrawled on a piece of paper. Train the worthy. Trust no one. Survival is the only medal. Ryan had folded it carefully and kept it, the only tangible evidence that Ghost had existed, and that he had trained someone in the shadows. That note now felt alive in his mind, echoing through time, linking him to Elena in ways he couldn't yet explain. Ryan shook his head, trying to refocus. This wasn't a memory anymore. This was now. Elena Ward was standing in the barracks, her gaze calm, her posture disciplined, her rifle an extension of herself. She had the precision of Ghost, the patience of Ghost, and perhaps the audacity of Ghost. Ryan realized that she had been trained to not just survive, but to excel, to dominate, and perhaps to outshine the legend itself. And yet there was more, a humanity in her, a restraint, a purpose that Ghost himself might not have possessed. He thought about the recruits who had laughed at her during the day, oblivious to the storm of skill and history surrounding her. They had mocked her, dismissed her, assumed she was lucky. Ryan knew better. She was lethal, and she carried a story that could shatter their perception of reality. The very air around her seemed to hum with quiet power, the kind that demanded attention without ever raising its voice. The desert sun began to rise over the horizon, casting long shadows across the training field. Ryan stepped outside, letting the morning heat wash over him, and watched Elena as she prepared for another round of drills. Every movement was precise, deliberate, almost meditative. He felt a mixture of awe, respect, and unease. This was no ordinary recruit. This was something else entirely. Something forged in fire, shadow, and the unseen hand of a master sniper who had become a legend. Ryan exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. Ghost's shadow was everywhere now, in Elena, in her training, in the precision of her shots. And he knew that this was only the beginning. The past had returned, alive in a way he couldn't yet comprehend, and the story of Ghost, and now Elena, was far from over. As he watched, Elena fired again, a single shot ringing through the desert like a bell, clean and unwavering. Dead center. The clang of the metal gong echoed across the range, carrying with it the weight of history, the imprint of legend, and the first whisper of the storm to come. Ryan's jaw tightened. He realized, with a chill in his spine, that he was standing at the threshold of a story that could change everything he thought he knew about skill, survival, and the legacy of a ghost. The desert was quiet again, but the air seemed charged, heavy with unspoken truths. Ghost's teachings, his discipline, his shadowy presence, had returned to the world in the form of Elena Ward. And Ryan knew, as the sun climbed higher, burning away the last traces of night, that nothing would ever be the same. The high-altitude training field in Colorado was unforgiving. Thin air bit at every inhale, making hearts pound and muscles tire faster than at sea level. The temperature dropped as the morning progressed, cold enough to numb fingers despite gloves, but the biting wind was constant, gusting unpredictably across the ridges and valleys that stretched for miles. Today, the recruits faced what the instructors called the impossible test, a 2,000-meter shot across a variable crosswind with moving steel targets. Every sniper had dreamed of mastering it. Few ever succeeded. Captain Ryan Callan stood beside the firing line, binoculars slung around his neck, scanning the distant ridges. He watched as recruits took turns, adjusting scopes, bracing against the wind, and firing. Most missed, some barely nipped the steel. Frustration rippled across the field. Sweat dripped down foreheads, breath came in sharp, ragged gasps, and the impossible air of the mountain seemed to conspire against them. Ryan noted every miscalculation, wind misreads, trigger hesitation, timing errors. Precision was everything, and most of these men didn't have it. Then came Elena Ward, quiet, calm, collected. She approached the firing line with a rifle in hand, the case dangling from her shoulder. Recruits glanced at each other, whispering, "She's going first?" One muttered, "She never hit it." Another snorted, shaking his head. Laughter rippled along the line, light and nervy, unaware of the storm they were about to witness. Ryan felt a familiar tightening in his chest, the same unease he had experienced the first day he saw her at the desert range. She wasn't just skilled, she was something else entirely. "Permission to demonstrate," Elena said softly, addressing Ryan without lifting her eyes from the target. Her voice was calm, measured, carrying a quiet authority that made some recruits shift uncomfortably. Ryan nodded, tension coiling in his gut. "Proceed." She set her rifle on the bipod, adjusted her breathing, and slowly scanned the terrain. Every movement was deliberate, eye alignment, scope calibration, minute adjustment for wind. She didn't rush. The other recruits held their breath, mocking energy gone, replaced by disbelief and nervous tension. Ryan felt his pulse quicken. This was Ghost's precision. Every small adjustment, every careful pause. He had seen it all before. It was unnervingly familiar. She exhaled, squeezed the trigger, and fired. The rifle cracked through the thin mountain air. Dust puffed around the distant steel target. Silence. Then, a clang. Dead center. A ripple ran through the field. Recruits gaped, mouths agape. Some stumbled back in shock. Others muttered incomprehensible curses. One recruit whispered, "Impossible." The wind carried the echo of the shot across the ridges, clear and pure, like a bell tolling across the canyon. Ryan lowered his binoculars, jaw tight, heart pounding. It was mathematically perfect. No correction, no hesitation. The impossible had become undeniable. Another shot followed. Same result. Dead center. Each bullet landed exactly where it should, accounting for gusts and mirages, as if the rifle itself were guided by some unseen hand. Ryan felt a chill in his spine. He had trained many elite snipers over the years, but he had never seen anything like this. Not even close. She wasn't just skilled. She was a living embodiment of Ghost's techniques, sharpened, refined, and elevated to a level that bordered on inhuman. Her call sign crackled over the radio. Echo 7, Ryan froze. The name was familiar, chillingly so. Ghost had once used it in comms, and hearing it again brought a wave of memories. Long nights crouched in sand. The faint hiss of enemy movements, the clean, deadly crack of a single, perfectly timed shot that could turn the tide of a mission. Ryan's eyes met Elena's across the line. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply readied her rifle for the next shot. Calm, composed, deadly. The recruits had gone silent. Some were pale, some were wide-eyed. Their earlier mockery had dissolved into awe, disbelief, and fear. One attempted a weak joke. She must have a GPS in that rifle. Elena didn't respond. She didn't need to. The message was clear. Skill like this didn't require explanation. Precision spoke for itself. Ryan stepped forward, taking a deep breath. He couldn't ignore the truth anymore. "Ward," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Elena's eyes met his, calm and unwavering. "From someone who doesn't exist anymore," she said softly. Ryan felt the words hit him like a hammer. Ghost. His mind raced back to Fallujah, to the man who had vanished after saving his squad, whose precision had been legendary, whose existence had been officially erased. And now, here he was, staring at the living legacy of that man, or perhaps the living embodiment of his training. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Elena continued to fire, each shot a mirror of the last, unerringly perfect. Ryan observed every nuance, the rhythm of her breathing, the minute adjustments for wind drift, the absolute control she maintained over her heartbeat, her body, and her mind. It was terrifying in its perfection, almost inhuman, yet undeniably human. She carried a story in every movement, a story of survival, of loss, of discipline that went beyond the curriculum, beyond any manual, beyond anything Ryan had ever witnessed. As the sun began to dip below the Colorado peaks, casting long shadows across the training field, Ryan finally allowed himself a moment of reflection. Elena Ward was no ordinary recruit. She was someone molded by war, by legend, by a ghost that had once saved lives and disappeared without a trace. And now she was here, unbroken, lethal, and unflinching. The recruits began packing up, their whispered conversations a mix of disbelief and awe. Elena dismantled her rifle with the same meticulous care she had displayed all day, sliding each piece into the case with silent precision. Ryan walked over, the chill of the evening brushing against his face. He stopped beside her, his voice low. "Ward, whatever your past, whatever training you've had, it's remarkable, but it's also dangerous. You carry a legacy most of us only read about in history books." Elena looked at him, her expression calm, unreadable. "I know," she said simply, "and I'll carry it until it's no longer needed." Ryan's pulse quickened. The mountain wind whispered through the peaks, carrying the echo of shots fired, the weight of history, and the lingering presence of a ghost that had refused to die. He realized then that today was not just a test of skill. It was the first step in a story that would change everything he thought he knew about war, precision, and survival. The desert might have been silent, but the mountain rang with the promise of something greater. Ghost's shadow was alive, and it walked in the form of Elena Ward. And Ryan knew, deep in his bones, that the real story, the one that would test courage, skill, and loyalty, had only just begun. The clang of the metal doors echoed down the sterile hallways of the Intelligence Command Office in Washington, D.C. Ryan Callan walked briskly, his boots tapping against polished concrete. He felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. Elena Ward's performance in Colorado had gone beyond exceptional. It had raised questions that could no longer remain confined to a training field. Word of her precision, the near supernatural execution of the impossible test, had already reached higher-ups. Now she was summoned. Ryan knew that once intelligence got involved, the rules would change and safety would become negotiable. The office was stark, lights harsh and unflinching, walls lined with screens displaying maps, bullet trajectories, and operational data. Elena entered quietly, her posture flawless, green eyes scanning the room. She had been briefed only minimally, a routine review, nothing threatening. But she could sense the tension, the unspoken suspicion. Men and women in suits, some uniformed officers, others civilian analysts, waited for her arrival. Their curiosity was tinged with unease, the kind that comes when skill exceeds comprehension and cannot be neatly categorized or controlled. An intelligence officer, tall and severe, stepped forward, extending a hand that Elena did not shake. "Sergeant Ward," he began, "your performance in Colorado has drawn attention. Your results are remarkable. Explain them." Elena's expression remained calm. "My results are the product of discipline and training," she said. "And experience." The officer frowned. "Experience you acquired. Where, exactly?" "Military records indicate gaps. Missing years. No prior training documented. We need clarity, Sergeant. Lives could be at stake." Ryan stepped beside her, shielding her with presence and authority. "Her results speak for themselves," he said firmly. "I've witnessed her performance firsthand. She's precise, patient, and capable. Her skill isn't a threat, it's an asset." A murmur ran through the room. Analysts exchanged glances. One young civilian leaned forward. "Are you suggesting she was trained outside official programs? Privately?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "Yes, she was trained by a mentor, a sniper who operated off the grid. His techniques are beyond conventional curriculum." The office went silent. A senior officer cleared his throat. "Off-grid training? Unregulated? Unsanctioned? That sounds dangerous. Rogue operatives, unsupervised instruction. This could be a breach." Elena tilted her head slightly. "I was trained to survive," she said quietly. "That's the difference. Survival and skill, not ego or politics." The senior officer's gaze hardened. "You were trained by Ghost, correct?" Ryan flinched at the name, but Elena's eyes remained steady. "Call him what you will," she said softly. "He's my mentor. He taught me to vanish, to wait, to act with precision. That's all you need to know." A young analyst gasped softly, as if the words confirmed something long suspected. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Ghost was a legend, a man the military had officially listed as Keir years ago. To suggest he had survived, trained someone, and now indirectly influenced operations bordered on scandal. The senior officer leaned forward, voice low, urgent. "If Ghost is alive, that's a potential threat. If he trained you outside regulations, it could implicate both of you. We need your full cooperation. Elena's jaw tightened. I don't need to cooperate with anything that endangers people. My skills exist to protect, not to serve bureaucracies or politics. Ryan placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, his eyes locking with hers. He knew the danger. Intelligence might respect her skill, but they also feared it. To them, she was an anomaly, unpredictable, uncontrollable. She was trained to be perfect in combat, but she wasn't theirs to command. Sergeant Ward, the officer said, exhaling slowly, we're not questioning your loyalty. But the government doesn't ignore anomalies like you. If Ghost survived, and if you carry his techniques, we need assurances that these skills are used responsibly. Elena's green eyes glimmered, a mix of defiance and determination. I don't need assurances. I operate with precision. If you doubt that, test me. I'll prove it, again, if necessary. Ryan's thoughts turned to Montana. Somewhere in those remote wilderness cabins, Ghost had trained her, taught her the lessons he had once shared with Ryan and others who had survived. That training had created a soldier beyond regulations, beyond manuals, a living weapon, disciplined and loyal to a code that no bureaucracy could comprehend. The officer pulled a folder across the table, photographs sliding into view. Images of a rustic cabin, spent .308 casings scattered across a wooden floor, and a bearded man crouched with a rifle in shadows. Ryan's chest tightened as he recognized the posture, the silhouette. Ghost, do you recognize this man? The officer asked. Elena's gaze softened, just slightly, a flicker of memory crossing her face. He taught me everything I know, she said. Every shot, every breath, every calculation. He was my teacher. He saved my life. The room's tension was palpable. Ghost wasn't supposed to exist. He was a phantom, a legend whispered about in special forces circles, officially dead. Yet Elena carried his teachings, his legacy, his precision, alive in every fiber of her being. Sir, Ryan said, stepping forward, she isn't a threat. If anything, she's proof that Ghost's methods can be passed on safely. She's disciplined, she's focused, and she's loyal to the right cause. We shouldn't fear her. We should utilize her skills wisely. The senior officer's eyes narrowed. Wisely is subjective. Ghost operated outside protocol. You understand that, don't you? Ryan nodded. I do. But so does she. Elena packed her rifle slowly, methodically, her calmness contrasting sharply with the rising tension. I was trained to survive, not to obey bureaucracies. But I will follow orders when they save lives, not when they serve ego or politics, she said quietly. But the room felt the weight of her words. The officer exhaled, clearly weighing options. We'll need to monitor her. Full cooperation. All missions documented. This is a containment protocol, not a punishment. Elena nodded, accepting the terms without fear. She had faced death countless times, learned to act alone, and survived impossible odds. She was not intimidated by politics or threats. She was focused, disciplined, and lethal. After the meeting, Ryan walked beside her, voice low. You need to be careful. They don't understand you. They won't respect what you carry unless they see it firsthand. Elena's green eyes flickered briefly. I know, but I won't compromise my training. Ghost's legacy isn't theirs to control. It's mine to honor. Ryan exhaled slowly, watching her walk down the corridor, her steps steady and purposeful. He realized that whatever came next, missions, investigations, danger, Elena Ward was no ordinary soldier. She was a living testament to Ghost's skills, forged in secrecy, honed to perfection, and ready to confront whatever threats lay ahead. Somewhere, deep in the shadows, Ghost's presence lingered. Not as a man, but as a legacy, alive in Elena, guiding her, shaping her, and preparing her for the storms that were yet to come. And Ryan knew with certainty that intelligence scrutiny was only the beginning. The real challenges, the ones that tested skill, loyalty, and survival, were just over the horizon. The road to Montana was long and winding, snaking through dense pine forests and rocky passes that stretched toward the jagged peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains. Ryan Callan drove in silence, eyes fixed on the road, mind racing with questions. Elena sat beside him, her rifle secured in the back seat, expression calm, almost meditative. The quiet between them was heavy with anticipation, the kind that builds before uncovering truths long hidden. Every mile brought them closer to the remote wilderness where Ghost had supposedly trained her, where his presence lingered like a shadow refusing to fade. The journey had been carefully planned. GPS coordinates supplied by an intelligence analyst led them to a secluded valley, surrounded by cliffs and dense undergrowth. As they neared the location, Ryan could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. He remembered Ghost in Iraq, silent, precise, terrifyingly skilled, and now, a decade later, the legacy of that man was about to reveal itself in a cabin tucked deep in Montana's wilderness. Finally, the trees cleared, and a small clearing opened up, revealing a weathered log cabin, partially obscured by overgrown foliage. The roof sagged slightly, and the windows were cracked and dusty, but the structure was intact, bearing the weight of years without care. Spent brass casings glittered faintly in the fading sunlight, scattered like breadcrumbs across the ground. Ryan's pulse quickened. Every detail screamed familiarity. The careful placement of logs, the clean interior space, the remnants of meticulous routines. This was Ghost's world, preserved in time, untouched and unclaimed. They approached cautiously. Alana's boots sank slightly in the soft soil as she moved, eyes scanning the surroundings with a predator's awareness. "He taught me to read terrain like this," she said softly, almost to herself. "Every sound, every shadow, every pattern has meaning." Ryan nodded, impressed and unnerved by the precision in her observation. It was the same focus Ghost had taught, the same silent command over the environment. Inside, the cabin told a story. Dusty shelves lined the walls, filled with military manuals, notebooks with meticulous calculations, and rifle parts laid out as if awaiting assembly. Photographs hung on the wall, black and white images of a younger Ghost, crouched in battlefields, and one photograph that made Ryan's chest tighten. Elena as a child, standing beside a bearded man with the same piercing gaze she now possessed. A rifle rested between them, perfectly aligned, almost ceremonial in its presentation. Ryan exhaled, voice low. "He raised you?" Elena nodded, her eyes distant, remembering every moment. "He wasn't just a teacher. He taught me to survive, to calculate, to aim. He saved me once, then disappeared. Told me I had to carry on his lessons myself." Behind the cabin, a small grave marked with a crude wooden cross caught Ryan's attention. The inscription read, "You'll never see me, but you'll always aim true." The words sent a chill down his spine. Ghost had planned his absence, ensuring his legacy would continue through Elena, a living, breathing embodiment of his teachings, capable of completing missions he never could. Ryan moved closer, examining the grave and the surrounding terrain. "He made sure you'd survive," he said softly. "Not just physically, but mentally. You were meant to inherit everything he taught, weren't you?" Elena knelt beside the grave, fingertips brushing the rough wood. "He told me to honor the skills, not the man. If I fail, it's on me. If I succeed, then his lessons live on." Her voice was steady, unwavering, yet carried the weight of memory and grief. As they explored the cabin further, Ryan noticed journals filled with diagrams, firing tables and notes on wind currents, mirage effects, and ballistics. Each page reflected Ghost's obsessive precision, every detail honed for survival and deadly accuracy. Elena had absorbed it all, mastering not just technique, but the philosophy behind it. Survival wasn't about brute force. It was about patience, calculation, and the unshakable control of mind and body. Ryan's gaze fell on a small box in the corner. Opening it revealed a rifle engraved with delicate patterns along the barrel. He recognized the model instantly. One Ghost had used in Iraq. Inside, a note, "To E.W., never miss." Ryan felt the weight of history in his hands. This was not just a weapon. It was a symbol of trust, a bridge between Ghost's past and Elena's present. Elena picked up the rifle carefully, reverently, as if holding a piece of Ghost himself. This was his final lesson, she whispered. Precision isn't just about hitting the target. It's about understanding yourself, the weapon, the environment, and knowing when to act and when to wait. Ryan watched her, awe and respect mingling with the weight of responsibility. This was more than training. It was a transfer of legacy, a culmination of everything Ghost had lived and learned. And Elena carried it all, not as a student, but as a successor, a continuation of a story that had begun in the deserts of Iraq and now thrived in the mountains of Montana. The sun dipped lower, casting the cabin and clearing in shades of gold and crimson. Ryan and Elena sat together outside, surveying the wilderness. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant call of a hawk and the rustle of trees. "You understand now," Ryan said quietly, "why I'm both impressed and worried. What you carry, it's powerful. Too powerful to ignore. Too dangerous if misunderstood." Elena nodded. "I know. That's why I'm careful. I follow the lessons, not orders blindly. Ghost trained me for life, not politics. If I lose focus, I fail, and that's all there is. If I succeed, I honor him." Ryan exhaled slowly, letting the wind carry his unease. "You're more than ready," he said softly. "But so much depends on what comes next. Intelligence, missions, enemies. They'll all want a piece of you now." Elena rose, lifting the rifle with grace, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Let them come," she said, voice calm but firm. "I don't fear what's ahead. I only act when necessary, and I act with precision. That's all Ghost ever taught me, and that's all I'll ever need." The mountains stood silent around them, guardians of the cabin and the legacy it housed. Ghost's presence lingered in every log, every spent casing, every careful note. He had vanished from the world of men, but his lessons lived on in Elena Ward, sharper, deadlier, and ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. Ryan watched her, heart heavy and mind alert. This was no ordinary soldier. She was a living testament, carrying a legend into the modern battlefield. And he knew, with a certainty that sent chills down his spine, that whatever came next, danger, conflict, or discovery, Elena Ward would meet it with the skill, patience, and unflinching precision of a Ghost. The sun hung low over the rugged terrain, casting long shadows across the desert valley. Elena Ward crouched behind a jagged outcrop of sandstone, her rifle cradled against her shoulder, breath steady and slow. The target lay more than 2,500 meters away, a high value, insurgent leader known for eluding capture and orchestrating attacks across multiple regions. Today, Elena was the only chance to stop him. Every calculation, every whisper of wind, every heartbeat mattered. One shot would decide the mission, perhaps even lives. Ryan Callan adjusted his binoculars beside her, scanning the ridges, monitoring the team of operatives positioned in flanking locations. Communication crackled through encrypted channels, a chorus of tension and discipline. All eyes on target, Ryan whispered, not moving his lips. Elana's focus was absolute, her green eyes narrowing through the scope, every muscle attuned to the rifle, the wind, and the distance. Her mind flashed back to Montana, to Ghost's cabin, to the journals and rifles, to his lessons about patience, observation, and restraint. Control your breathing. Control your heartbeat. Control the environment, then control the shot. She repeated the mantra silently, letting it calm her nerves, sharpen her senses. This wasn't just a test of skill. It was the culmination of every lesson she had ever learned. Ghost's legacy, now fully hers, guided her hands. The insurgent leader moved across the open ground, unaware of the eye watching from the ridge. Elena adjusted for mirage, wind speed, elevation, and temperature, applying ballistics calculations faster than most minds could process. She exhaled slowly, counting each second like a pulse, and waited. Ghost's teachings echoed in her mind. Patience was victory. Hesitation was death. Target at 2,520 meters. Crosswind 6.3 knots, Ryan reported softly through comms. Environmental conditions stable. Wind gusts increasing slightly. Elena nodded minutely, her finger brushing the trigger lightly. The rifle's bipod dug into the sandstone, steady as a heartbeat. Around her, the team remained hidden, silent shadows against the fading light. They trusted her skill, though none fully understood the depth of it. Some called her Ghost's protege. Others whispered about legends reborn. No one dared challenge her focus. Then the leader stopped, kneeling briefly to examine a map. Elena's pulse slowed, her body syncing with the rhythm of the desert. She adjusted the scope's elevation, accounted for Coriolis' effect, and settled the crosshair on the target's chest. The moment stretched, timeless and delicate. Every breath, every whisper of wind, every heartbeat mattered. Now, Ryan whispered. The shock rang out like a crack of thunder in the valley. The bullet traced its path through the rarefied air, invisible to the eye, yet guided by precision honed through years of shadowed training. Dust and debris erupted as the target collapsed. Silence followed, heavy and absolute, broken only by the wind brushing against rock and sand. Elena exhaled, slowly lowering her rifle. Every muscle relaxed, yet her focus remained, trained to react to any sudden threat. Ryan moved closer, scanning the terrain, mind alert. Target neutralized. Clean shot, he reported, awe creeping into his voice. You made that look effortless. Elena shook her head slightly. Effortless isn't the point. Accuracy is the point. Control is the point. The team regrouped, carefully moving toward extraction points. Elena remained vigilant, scanning the ridges, watching for any unforeseen danger. Ghost's lessons guided her every decision. Anticipate, observe, remain calm. The legacy of her mentor wasn't just the shot itself, but the understanding of responsibility that came with it. A life could be changed or saved in a single moment of clarity. As they moved toward cover, Ryan spoke quietly, eyes scanning the valley. Ward, that was more than precision. That was ghost-level calculation. Every adjustment perfect. He would be proud. Elena allowed herself a fleeting smile, the first in hours. I aim to honor the lessons. That's the only way he lives on. The extraction helicopter appeared over the ridge, rotors kicking up dust and sand. Elena secured her rifle, moving swiftly yet deliberately toward the landing zone. The team boarded with practiced efficiency, tension still palpable. Ryan watched her, admiration and concern battling inside him. She had faced the impossible, executed with perfection, yet the weight of Ghost's legacy still pressed on her. As the helicopter lifted off, Elena looked down at the valley below. The desert stretched endlessly, every shadow and ridge etched into her mind. Ghost had once moved through landscapes like this, unseen, precise, unstoppable. And now she had walked in his footsteps, executed his philosophy, and emerged alive, unchanged, yet transformed. The team returned to base as night fell, lights illuminating the barracks and vehicles. Ryan and Elena walked side by side, debriefing in low tones. "Mission accomplished," he said softly. "But you understand what this means, right? Intelligence, command. They'll be watching. They'll want to understand your methods, and they won't fully grasp them." Elena's eyes glimmered in the dim light. "They don't need to understand. They only need results." Her voice was calm, resolute. "I don't operate for approval. I operate for precision and survival." Ryan shook his head slightly, exhaling slowly. "That's what makes you extraordinary and dangerous. Ghost trained you to survive, to act with skill beyond comprehension. You've honored that today." She nodded, reflecting on the journey from a remote Montana cabin to the desert valley where she had just made history in silence. Every lesson, every hour, every shot had led to this moment. She was no longer just a soldier or a recruit. She was a legacy, alive, lethal, and unflinching. That night, as the base settled into uneasy calm, Ryan and Elena stood at the edge of the barracks, looking out over the darkened landscape. The wind carried the echoes of shots fired, the whispers of past mentors, and the promise of future challenges. Ghost's shadow was no longer distant. It lived in Elena Ward, guiding her hands, her mind, and her destiny. Ryan broke the silence, voice low but steady. "You did it. You became what he always intended. But remember, this isn't the end. There will be more tests, more targets, more consequences. Are you ready for what comes next?" Elena's gaze was steady, unwavering. "I've been ready since the day he disappeared. I carry his lessons, and I'll face whatever comes with precision. That's my path." Ryan nodded, feeling both relief and apprehension. The mission was complete, but the story, their story, Ghost's story, and the legacy of lessons learned in the shadows was far from over. For Elena Ward, every shot was more than a bullet. It was history, honor, and survival, all converging in one perfect moment. And as the night settled over the desert once more, a silent promise hung in the air. Ghost's legacy was alive, unbroken, and unstoppable, embodied in the unflinching precision of Elena Ward. The morning sun filtered through the barracks windows, casting soft light across the training field. Elena Ward moved deliberately, her rifle slung over her shoulder, inspecting the targets and reviewing equipment with the same meticulous care she had always shown. The events of the past months, the impossible shots, the intelligent scrutiny, and the high-stakes mission in the desert had settled into a rhythm, a quiet tension that underscored her every action. Ghost's lessons had become second nature, embedded in muscle memory, reflexes, and thought. She carried his legacy not as a burden, but as a compass. Ryan Callan watched her from a distance, leaning against a vehicle, binoculars slung around his neck. There was a rare softness in his gaze, tempered by the awareness that what Elena carried was extraordinary, and in many ways, terrifying. She had survived situations that would have broken most seasoned soldiers. She had executed shots no one else could conceive, her mind a repository of calculation, patience, and lethal precision. And yet, she was more than a weapon. She was a living testament to the man who had disappeared, the mentor who had forged her in shadows. The recruits nearby moved cautiously, whispering to each other as they observed Elena. No one dared interrupt. They had learned that mockery was met with silence and patience was a lesson in itself. She was respected, feared, and quietly admired. The air around her seemed charged, carrying the weight of her history and the precision of her skill. Every small movement conveyed authority, every glance measured and deliberate. Ryan approached her quietly. "You've settled in well," he said, voice low. Elena looked up briefly, nodding. "It's necessary. Ghost taught me to anticipate, adapt, and endure. Control is everything." Ryan's eyes followed her gaze to the training field, where targets were set at extreme distances, some moving, some obscured by obstacles. Control, yes. But there's more than that. There's legacy. You're carrying a story most people will never understand. Elena's lips curved into a faint smile, a rare acknowledgement of the weight she bore. "I know. It's not just about surviving or hitting a target. It's about making sure the lessons, the principles, continue, even when he's gone." She paused, eyes scanning the horizon. Ghost believed that skill without purpose was meaningless. "I've learned that lesson well." Ryan nodded, silently acknowledging her words. "You've done more than learn. You've become the embodiment of it. And today? Today you've secured your place, not just as a soldier, but as the continuation of a legend." The barracks were quiet for a moment, save for the distant clatter of rifles and the occasional bark of an instructor. Elena moved toward a line of recruits, demonstrating adjustments for wind drift, breathing techniques, and trigger control. Her instruction was precise, deliberate, yet patient. She didn't dominate. She guided. Every gesture, every word carried authority without arrogance. Ryan watched her interactions, noting the subtle ways she instilled confidence, respect, and fearlessness. A young recruit raised a question about mirage correction. Elena knelt beside him, adjusting his stance and breathing. "See the heat waves across the field?" she asked softly. "They distort perception. Control your breathing, focus on the crosshair, and trust your calculations. Never rush. Precision is patience." The recruit nodded, eyes wide, absorbing her guidance. Ryan recognized the pattern, Ghost's mentorship alive in motion. Elena wasn't just teaching. She was shaping soldiers in the mold of survival, discipline, and focus that had once saved Ryan's life and countless others. Later, Ryan and Elena walked alone along the perimeter of the field. "Do you ever wonder if he's still out there?" Ryan asked quietly. "Ghost, I mean. Watching, moving, training someone else in another corner of the world?" Elena's eyes softened briefly, reflective. "Sometimes, but it doesn't matter. His lessons are in me now. That's all that matters. The man may be gone, but the principles endure. I carry them forward." Ryan exhaled, feeling both relief and awe. "You're extraordinary. But extraordinary can be dangerous if misunderstood." She nodded, a quiet determination in her green eyes. "I know, and I'll make sure it isn't. The skills are mine to wield responsibly. I won't let them become a tool for ego or politics. Ghost taught me more than just marksmanship. He taught me morality in action." Ryan's gaze swept over the horizon. "You've already proven that. Today, tomorrow, and beyond, you'll continue to honor him and yourself. That's rare. That's remarkable." As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, the barracks took on a serene quiet. Elena stood on the ridge overlooking the training field, her silhouette a testament to precision, patience, and purpose. The wind carried faint echoes of gunfire, whispers of lessons learned in Montana and Iraq, and the intangible presence of a ghost who had forged more than a sniper. He had forged a legacy. Ryan joined her, standing silently beside her. "Do you ever feel alone in carrying it?" he asked. Elena's eyes met his, calm and unwavering. "Not alone. I carry him. I carry his lessons, his guidance. Every calculation, every breath, every shot is a tribute. Ghost isn't gone. He lives in what I do. Ryan nodded, a mixture of respect, admiration, and awe settling over him. He realized that Elena Ward was not just a soldier or a sniper. She was history in motion, a bridge between the past and the future, carrying the unseen presence of a mentor whose name would remain a legend. And in her, the story lived on, precise, lethal, and alive. Night fell over the base. Lights flickered across the barracks, shadows stretching long across the training fields. Elena sat quietly, rifle in hand, reviewing the day's exercises. Every movement was deliberate, every thought controlled, every breath measured. She had faced impossible odds, survived scrutiny, executed the final shot, and now stood as the embodiment of Ghost's lessons. Ryan watched from a distance, realizing the full magnitude of her journey. From a young girl trained in secrecy, to a recruit tested and scrutinized, to a sniper whose precision had changed the course of a mission, Elena had completed a journey that few could comprehend. She had become not just a soldier, but a legacy. Finally, she rose, securing her rifle and stepping to the edge of the ridge. The wind swept across her face, carrying the whispers of desert sands, Montana pines, and distant mountains. She looked out at the horizon, steady, confident, and prepared. Ghost's shadow would always follow her, not as a specter, but as a guiding force. Ryan joined her one last time, voice low but certain. The legacy is preserved. You've made sure of it. Elena nodded, her gaze unwavering. And I'll continue. Every shot, every lesson, every mission, it all carries forward. Ghost's teachings are alive in me, in every soldier who learns from them, and in every choice I make. The night settled over the base, quiet and still. Stars twinkled above, distant and eternal, like eyes of silent witnesses. And in that moment, it was clear. Ghost's legend had not ended with his disappearance. It lived on in Elena Ward, precise, unflinching, and eternal. The legacy was preserved, not just in skill, but in purpose, morality, and the unwavering pursuit of perfection. And as Ryan watched her silhouette against the horizon, he understood fully. The story of Ghost was no longer about a man who vanished. It was about a woman who carried him forward, honoring the past while shaping the future, one perfect shot at a time. The desert, the mountains, the shadows, they all bore witness. The legacy lived on.